Hello everyone and welcome to this final, for now, city profiles for the Green Infrastructure and Sustainable Cities module. And this final profile will be about the city of Shanghai in China. Now, Shanghai offers a very interesting case for GI because of the nature of expansion in the city, and because of the way in which it's expanding so rapidly. There are real concerns about a lack of green space in the city and the way in which people may or may not be able to access it and its benefits. And one of the things about Shanghai is that the Shanghai government has a very strategic approach to investment in green infrastructure, which looks at a very overarching city scale for what's happening, using larger areas of green belts, of linear features and big parks, as well as the rivers and creeks in the city to really try and create a network of green space. And at the moment it has around 13 meters of green space per person, which for a Chinese city is quite high, but also compared to many European cities, be it Berlin or be it parts of the Netherlands, is quite high as well. But what we can see with Shanghai is that there is a scale issue in terms of a lot of this GI is congregated into single large destination areas rather than being spread out across the city. So whilst we might have large scale and big sizes in terms of GI investments, be it through city scale parks, we have less GI at a local level or a neighbourhood level. And what this tends to mean is that people congregate or they move towards these larger sites, and there's less functionality, less walkability in terms of how GI is incorporated into individual streets or developments. So we have to think quite carefully about the spatial layout of GI in Shanghai, and how that actually leads to quite a varied landscape of opposition, so green in one place and not green in another. In addition to this, we have to think quite carefully about how the economic position of Shanghai as a slightly different management of the city, and its presentation as a more open and financially driven city is leading to differences in its GI investment. And we see quite clear disparities between some of the money spent on development in Pudong, so the financial district, versus some of the older neighbourhoods. We can also think carefully about the way in which society and the cultural understandings of place are very visible in Shanghai. So some of the former gardens, some of the more traditional gardens are used as tourist attractions rather than for that tranquility or that engagement with nature. And whereas some of the other larger green spaces might be used in a more multifunctional way. But one thing that is clear within Shanghai is that GI has been integrated into the policy and the proposed management of the city. And we can see that if we look at the Urban Development Museum in the city, where GI has a whole section. It shows the linear layout and the spatial footprint of GI. And a lot of this is down to economics and make sure it's a prosperous place to live, but also it's about addressing that local need within a neighbourhood context. So people are thinking about how they access it, how they actually provide amenities for older people or for children, and then of course who actually benefits and who actually gets to choose where these places are. And a lot of this is mixed up with issues around water management and climate change, so making the city more livable. And a lot of it is reflections on what local communities want and trying to build that up into a city-scale discussion about green infrastructure. But what we tend to see is a lot of quite high-end and visible and landmark projects. So the Bund here on the right-hand side and in the middle, and then the Suzhou Creek on the left. And what they have here is these very linear features there. So they're using the Suzhou Creek or the main river, which I always say wrong, so I'm not going to say the name of it, in Shanghai as a focal destination point for investment in GI. And the Bund sort of linear feature is quite interesting because it has a series of different landscape features, a series of different places that you can interact with. This quite modern landscape architecture, and it's framed by the old banking houses and the old sort of stock exchanges on the right hand side, versus Pudong and the futuristic sort of skyscrapers on the left hand side, on the other side of the river in Pudong. And so what we see is that this is a place that hundreds of thousands of people go to on a daily basis, and it is one of the most well managed places in the city as well, but it is GI, even though it might not always look like it. The Suzhou Creek sort of GI is slightly different. It's very narrow. It's a thin strip that runs along the side of the creek, but it does offer a place that people can go and get some tranquility, some peace and quiet, a bit of respite from the heat. And it's a place where a lot of local fishermen go to do their fishing. So there are layers of meaning and layers of uses that you can see in that location. And this can be sort of counterposed to what we see in Pudong. So the two images at the top of the screen, there's a lot of quite large investment in GI along the river. So areas in the top left picture, so along the river itself, there's a new sort of wetland park, and a very large park in the centre of Pudong, which is the landmark area with quite interesting design from a Chinese perspective. It's very Western, but very North American rather than being influenced by China. But all this is sort of embedded within a set of skyscrapers, a set of high-rise, a set of glass buildings, which sort of suggest a very different understanding of what the GI is there for. Is it there to be interacted with? Is it there to provide functions for local people? Or is it there to just set the scene for these large skyscrapers? And I think from a personal perspective, I think the GI is actually quite poor in this area, because it doesn't really offer that many opportunities to interact with the landscape. They're very linear, so they don't actually permeate through into many of the residential areas. And yes, they have big landmark park, but you have to cross 12 lanes of highways to get there. And even the skywalk, which have planters there, are a nice addition, but they're not necessarily providing much of a functionality. They're more of an aesthetic quality. The picture in the bottom left there is one of the greenways that the city is proposing for its longer term development. And what they've been trying to do is incorporate new large scale parks along the rivers and along the creeks to sort of create a network of joined up spaces. And these will provide local amenities, so recreational amenities, as well as flooding and climate change mitigation projects as well. And finally, the image on the bottom right here, is potentially one of the more interesting aspects of Shanghai and green infrastructure. And like a lot of cities in East Asia, particularly in China, the use of the spaces underneath highways, underneath throughways, to either in some cases be car park, in other places be urban agriculture. But in the case of Shanghai, there are a number of linear parks that follow the motorway bridges and skyways, because the land is pretty much derelict or empty. And what you have here are spaces which are very, very framed by the motorways either side and above them, but also because of the way it's been planted, have quite a high level of screening, so they're actually quite quiet and quite cool. So you get these oases of green space underneath highways, which you might think is sort of counterintuitive. And if one thing that Shanghai is doing quite well, it is looking at using different techniques to invest in GI, be it underneath highways, be it along creeks to create greenways, be it big landmark sites in Pudong, or even the failed eco-city at Dongtang in the north of the city. So Shanghai, because of its position as quite a global city, as a financial centre, as a place with lots of money and lots of prestige, has been looking at GI as a way of framing that and helping it to bolster its position globally. But it's also there to provide opportunities to engage with nature and engage with the environment, not all of which is successful. So even though you might have a very high level of green space compared to other parts of Asia, other parts of the world indeed, it might not necessarily be green infrastructure that everyone can access. So again, we still have to think about questions of equitability, about functionality, about aesthetics. But I think Shanghai is an interesting case study where they've tried to integrate some of these ideas more readily. Again, I hope that was interesting, and please let me know what you think, and I'll see you all soon.